In the shadowed forests of eastern Thailand, there are stories no one dares to tell. Some charms are not made to protect the living, but to bind the dead. And when blood seals a spirit to the world of the living, the bond does not fade. It waits. Chapter 1. The village at the edge of Chanthaburi forest. The road into the village narrowed until it became little more than a ribbon of cracked asphalt swallowed by jungle roots. Dense trees leaned inward as if trying to seal the path behind those who entered. When Neera stepped off the bus, the driver did not wait for her to gather her bags. He shut the door immediately and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust drifting in the humid air. The village stood in uneasy silence. Wooden houses rested on stilts above damp earth, their paint peeling like old skin. Wind chimes hung from sagging roofs but made no sound. There were no barking dogs, no radios, no children running barefoot through the dirt. Even the insects seemed to hum at a distance, as though unwilling to cross an unseen boundary. Neera tightened her grip on her notebook. She had traveled from Bangkok to investigate rural spirit beliefs for a cultural feature, expecting colorful rituals and welcoming villagers eager to speak. Instead, she felt as though she had stepped into a place holding its breath. The air smelled of wet soil, burned incense, and something faintly metallic. A small tea stall stood near the road. An elderly woman sat behind it, her spine bent like a broken branch. She stared at Neera for a long moment before slowly pouring tea into a chipped porcelain cup. Her hands trembled, but not from age. "You should leave before night," the woman said in a voice dry as dead leaves. Neera forced a polite smile. "I'm only here for a few days." The woman's eyes shifted toward the forest behind the village. The trees were so dense that sunlight could not reach the ground beneath them. "No one stays after dark," she whispered. A breeze moved through the road, carrying the smell of ash and damp rot. Neera turned to look back toward the forest. For a brief moment, she thought she saw movement between the trunks, something pale withdrawing into shadow. When she turned back, the old woman had stopped pouring tea. The cup had overflowed, spilling onto the wooden table, yet she did not seem to notice. The silence deepened. Somewhere in the village, a door creaked open. And then, just as suddenly, it shut. Chapter 2. The First Warning. The house Neera rented stood at the far edge of the village, where the dirt road dissolved into weeds and shadow. It was built of dark teak wood, lifted on stilts above soft earth that smelled of rot and stagnant water. The landlord, a thin man with sunken cheeks, handed her a rusted key without meeting her eyes. "You sleep early," he muttered. "Do not open the door if you hear knocking after midnight." Before Neera could ask what he meant, he had already turned away. Inside, the house was sparsely furnished, a narrow bed, a small wooden table, and a single shrine shelf holding a dusty Buddha statue surrounded by burnt incense sticks. The air felt stale, as if the windows had not been opened in years. As sunset approached, the village grew unnaturally still. The last traces of daylight drained quickly, swallowed by the dense forest pressing against the horizon. When darkness came, it did not arrive gently, it fell like a curtain. Neera lay in bed, listening. No wind, no insects, no distant engines, only silence. She must have drifted into sleep when the sound came. Scratch. A faint dragging noise along the wall near her head. Scratch, scratch, scratch? Her eyes snapped open. She held her breath and listened again. The sound continued, slow and deliberate, as though fingernails were tracing the wooden boards from the outside. Neera reached for her phone and switched on the flashlight. The sound stopped. The wall was bare. No branches brushed against the house. No animals moved beneath the stilts. The beam of light trembled in her hand as she scanned the room. Nothing. After several minutes, the silence returned, thick and suffocating. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her back into uneasy sleep. Morning light revealed what the darkness had hidden. 3 long grooves carved across the wooden wall beside her bed. The marks were deep, splintered, and unmistakably fresh. They were too narrow to be made by tools, too straight to be made by animals. They looked like fingernail scratches. When the landlord came later to bring water, he froze at the sight of the wall. The color drained from his face. He whispered something under his breath before stepping back toward the door. "There is a binding here," he said hoarsely. "Someone has placed blood magic on this house." A chill crept slowly up Nira's spine. Outside, the forest stood silent, waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Legend of the Blood Charm. The village temple stood on a low hill overlooking the clustered rooftops below. Its roof tiles were cracked and mottled with moss, and faded red paint peeled from wooden pillars carved with guardian spirits whose faces had worn smooth with time. Incense smoke lingered in the air, thin and bitter. Nira climbed the stone steps just after sunrise. The silence in the village had followed her, broken only by the soft crunch of gravel beneath her shoes. Inside the temple, an elderly monk sat cross-legged beside a dim oil lamp. His robe hung loosely from his frail frame, and his eyes remained closed even after she approached. "I know why you have come," he said. Nira hesitated, about the house and the scratches. The monk opened his eyes slowly. They were clouded but unsettlingly aware. "This village does not suffer scratches," he murmured. "It suffers attachments." He gestured for her to sit. Outside, the wind stirred the prayer flags, but no sound entered the temple. "Long ago," he told her, "before the rubber plantations and paved roads, the forest belonged to spirits older than memory. When drought struck and crops failed, fear drove the villagers to seek help from a wandering occult master, a man who promised protection in exchange for obedience. He created what he called a blood charm. To bind a spirit, he required offerings. Strands of human hair, blood freely given by the living, bone fragments from the innocent dead, words spoken under a moonless sky. The charm did not banish spirits. It tethered them, bound to an object, bound to a place, bound to a person. And the spirit obeyed? Nira asked. The monk's gaze drifted toward the dark doorway. "For a time," he said, "until suffering turned obedience into hunger." The spirit bound by the charm was said to cling to its host. Feeding on fear, illness, and grief, families weakened, livestock died. Those who carried the charm wasted away slowly, as though something unseen fed upon their breath. "What happened to the master?" Nira whispered. "He disappeared," the monk replied, "but the charm did not." The oil lamp flickered, though no wind touched the flame. "Such bindings do not end," he continued softly. "They pass from hand to hand, from blood to blood." Nira felt a chill creep across her skin. In the stillness of the temple, she thought she heard a faint sound behind her, not footsteps, not breathing, but the soft drag of something being pulled across wood. When she turned, nothing stood in the doorway. Only the forest beyond, dark and watchful. The monk's voice dropped to a whisper. "If you have found it," he said, "do not let it choose you." Outside, the prayer flags twisted sharply, as if caught in a wind that did not touch the ground. Chapter 4. The Red Cloth Beneath the Floor. The house felt different when Nira returned from the temple. Not visibly changed, the same weathered boards, the same still air, yet something in the silence had thickened. As though the walls were listening. Even the light filtering through the shutters seemed dimmer, tinted with a grayish hue that made the room feel smaller. She tried to dismiss the feeling as fatigue. Instead, she began to notice details she had overlooked before. A faint smell, metallic and sour, lingered near the bed. The wooden floor beneath her feet creaked unevenly, one plank producing a dull, hollow sound. She paused, then stepped on it again. Hollow. Nira knelt and brushed away dust gathered in the seams between the boards. The plank shifted slightly under pressure. It had been loosened, not by age, but deliberately. A prickle of unease crept along her arms. Using the handle of a spoon, she pried the board upward. It resisted at first, then gave with a dry crack, releasing a breath of air from the darkness below. The smell that rose was thick and stale, like damp soil sealed away for decades. Something lay hidden in the cavity, wrapped in faded red cloth. The fabric was stiff with age and darkened by blotches that had turned nearly brown. Her fingers hovered above it. For a long moment she considered leaving it untouched, remembering the monk's warning. "If you have found it," Do not let it choose you. But curiosity, sharpened by dread, pushed her forward. She lifted the bundle. It was lighter than she expected. The cloth came apart slowly, its fibers brittle, disintegrating under her touch. Inside lay a collection of objects bound together with black thread. A lock of coarse black hair. A small fragment of bone, porous and yellowed. A thin metal charm etched with symbols too worn to read. And at the center, a dark, crusted stain soaked deep into the cloth. Old blood. The air in the room grew suddenly cold. Neera's breath fogged faintly in front of her lips. Somewhere behind her, wood creaked. She froze. The door had not opened. The windows remained shut, yet the sensation of presence filled the room, intimate, suffocating, as though someone stood just beyond the reach of her sight. A whisper brushed the air near her ear. Not a word. Not a breath. Only the faint impression of sound, like fabric dragged slowly across dry wood. Her hands began to tremble. The bundle slipped from her fingers and struck the floor with a soft, dull thud. The oil lamp flickered. And for a fraction of a second, in the shadow cast along the far wall, something shifted, a shape bending where no shape should be. Neera spun around. Nothing stood behind her. Only the open space of the room. But the cold did not leave. Outside, the forest remained silent, waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Woman Without a Shadow. Night fell with unnatural speed. One moment the horizon still held a dim wash of violet light. And the next, darkness pressed itself against the house like a living thing. Neera lit the oil lamp and set it on the table, its small flame struggling against the thick air. She told herself the cold in the room was only in her mind. That the bundle hidden beneath the floor had disturbed nothing except her imagination. Yet the smell of old iron lingered. She tried to write notes in her journal, but the silence weighed on her concentration. No insects buzzed against the shutters. No wind moved through the stilts beneath the house. Even her own breathing sounded intrusive. Then came the sound. A soft tap. From the window beside the bed. Neera looked up slowly. Tap. 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 Not knocking, not scratching, a measured contact, as if something outside were testing the glass. Her throat tightened, the lamp flame fluttered, bending sideways though the air remained still. She stood and moved closer, each step deliberate, as though sudden movement might invite something closer. The curtain stirred slightly. She reached out and pulled it aside. A woman stood outside the window. Her skin was pale with a gray undertone, stretched too tightly across sharp cheekbones. Long black hair hung forward, veiling most of her face. What little could be seen of her mouth revealed lips split and darkened, as if dried by years of thirst. Neera's breath caught. The woman did not blink. She did not sway. She did not breathe. The oil lamp behind Neera cast light through the glass, illuminating the figure clearly. But on the wooden wall outside, there was no shadow. The woman's head tilted slowly to one side, joints moving with a stiffness that did not belong to the living. Strands of hair shifted, revealing a sliver of her face. Her eyes were opened far too wide. The whites had turned a dull yellow. The pupils were black and depthless. Her mouth parted. It stretched wider. Wider than the structure of a human jaw should allow. Neera stumbled backward, the breath leaving her lungs in a silent gasp. The lamp flame flared violently, then shrank. When she dared look again, the window was empty. Only her own reflection stared back at her, pale, trembling, eyes rimmed with fear. She rushed to the door and flung it open. The night air was cold and heavy. The dirt beneath the window lay undisturbed. No footprints marked the soil. No movement stirred the tall grass. The forest loomed at the edge of darkness, dense and impenetrable. Behind her, the oil lamp flickered once more. And on the wooden floor near the bed, faint moisture spread across the boards, thin streaks glistening in the lamplight. As though something wet had been standing there, watching. Chapter 6. The Dream of Suffocation. Sleep did not come easily. Neera lay rigid beneath the thin blanket, eyes fixed on the ceiling where shadows shifted in the weak lamplight. Each time her eyelids drooped, she felt the cold again, not in the air, but beneath her skin, creeping slowly through her veins. The oil lamp sputtered once, then steadied. Silence filled the room like water filling a sealed chamber. At some point, exhaustion dragged her into sleep, and she began to dream. She was lying on the wooden floor beside the bed. She did not remember leaving the mattress. The air was thick and damp, pressing against her lungs. She tried to move, but her body refused to respond. Her arms lay pinned to her sides, heavy as stone. Something was wrong with the light. It flickered in pulses, dimming and brightening as though filtered through murky water. Then she felt it. A pressure against her throat. Cold. Deliberate. Fingers tightening. She tried to breathe. Nothing entered her lungs. The grip tightened slowly, savoring her panic. Spots of darkness bloomed across her vision. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, loud and frantic, yet the room remained utterly silent. She forced her eyes downward. There was no hand, no arm, only the unmistakable indentation pressing into her skin, as if invisible fingers were closing around her neck. Her chest convulsed. Her mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Then, close to her ear, came a whisper, brittle and dry, like leaves ground to dust. A voice she did not understand. A voice that did not belong to the living. The pressure tightened once more. Her vision collapsed into darkness. Neera woke with a violent gasp. Air tore into her lungs as she bolted upright, clutching her throat. The oil lamp had burned low, its flame reduced to a trembling bead of light. Sweat soaked her clothes despite the cold. For several seconds she could not breathe normally. Each inhale felt shallow and uncertain, as if her lungs had forgotten their purpose. Her fingers brushed her neck. She froze. The skin was tender, swollen. She stumbled to the small mirror hanging beside the table and lifted the lamp closer. Dark bruises bloomed across her throat. 5 distinct marks, the shape of fingers. Her pulse hammered violently. Behind her reflection, the room stood empty. Yet a faint imprint remained on the wooden floor beside the bed, shallow depressions in the dust, as though knees had pressed there, close to where her head had rested. The flame flickered. A breath of cold air grazed the back of her neck. Neera did not turn around. Outside, the forest remained silent. But deep within that silence, something had begun to breathe.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The Forgotten Grave. Morning brought no comfort. A gray pall hung over the village, muting colors and swallowing sound. The bruises on Neera's throat throbbed with each heartbeat, a dull reminder that what she had experienced was not merely a dream. She wrapped a scarf loosely around her neck and returned to the temple. The elderly monk studied her face without surprise, as if he had expected the marks to appear. "It has begun to recognize you," he said quietly. He drew a map in ash upon the stone floor, a crude outline of the forest beyond the village. One path curved toward a place he marked with a trembling finger. "Before the plantations," he murmured, "there was a burial ground. Those taken for binding rituals were not burned. They were hidden." Neera felt a tightening in her chest. Hidden from whom? From memory, he replied. The path into the forest narrowed quickly, swallowed by thick undergrowth and roots that twisted like veins across the earth. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the canopy, leaving the air damp and dim. The deeper she walked, the more the sounds of the village faded, replaced by a dense, listening stillness. The air smelled of wet leaves and something faintly sour, the scent of long-settled decay. After nearly an hour, she saw it. A clearing, small and uneven. The ground dipped slightly at its center, as though the earth had once been disturbed and never properly settled again. Half buried in moss and soil stood a stone marker. Its surface was cracked, the carved letters softened by decades of rain. Neera knelt and brushed away layers of dirt with trembling fingers. A name emerged. Molly. Below it, nearly erased. 1973. No date of death. Only absence. A chill moved through the clearing, though the air remained still. Nira became aware of the oppressive quiet, no insects, no bird calls, not even the rustle of leaves. She felt watched. The sensation crept slowly across her skin, intimate and suffocating. Behind her, something shifted. She turned sharply. Nothing stood among the trees. Yet the ground near the marker gave a faint, wet sound. A soft collapse. Nira looked down. The soil behind her boot had sunk inward, leaving a shallow depression. Dark earth bulged upward beside it, as though pressure from below were forcing the ground to breathe. Another small collapse followed. Then another. A slow line of sinking earth traced a path toward the grave marker. Her pulse roared in her ears. She stepped backward, but the soil yielded beneath her weight, soft and unstable. The depression deepened. Something beneath the surface moved, not with the sudden force of an animal, but with slow, patient intent. The earth trembled faintly. A bubble of dark mud broke at the surface, releasing a sour, trapped odor that burned the back of her throat. Nira stumbled away, heart hammering. Behind her, the ground continued to settle, then slowly stilled. Silence returned. The clearing looked unchanged. Only the faint line of disturbed soil remained, leading from the grave to where she had been standing. The forest pressed close around her, watching, waiting, and beneath the soil, something that had once been buried had begun to remember. Chapter 8. The Summoning Ritual. By the time Nira returned from the forest, the sky had turned the color of tarnished metal. A low pressure hung over the village, thick and unmoving, as though the air itself had weight. The monk did not ask what she had seen. He only nodded once. "It knows you have found her," he said. That evening, he prepared the ritual. Inside the temple, the oil lamps were extinguished one by one until only a single flame remained near the altar. The dim light threw long, wavering shadows across the cracked walls. The smell of incense thickened the air until each breath felt heavy and slow. The monk drew a circle on the floor using ash and crushed herbs. Within it, he placed a small bowl of water, a strip of saffron cloth, and a thin candle made of dark wax. "You must remain inside the circle," he instructed. "Whatever you hear, whatever you see, do not step beyond it." Nira nodded, though her throat felt tight. Outside, the wind began to rise. Not a steady wind, but uneven gusts that struck the temple walls in irregular bursts. Like something circling, searching for entry. The monk began to chant. His voice was low, rhythmic, and ancient. The syllables seemed to vibrate in the air rather than travel through it. Nira felt the sound in her chest, in her teeth, in the bones of her wrists. The candle flame flickered. The bowl of water trembled. Then the temple doors slammed shut. Nira flinched. The monk did not pause. The temperature dropped sharply. Her breath fogged before her lips. The ash circle stirred, thin gray strands lifting as if disturbed by an unseen current. A sound rose beneath the chanting. At first, it resembled wind moving through hollow reeds. Then it became something else. A thin, wavering cry. Not loud. Not human. It seeped into the temple like dampness through stone. The candle flame bent sideways. The water in the bowl rippled outward, though nothing touched it. Nira's pulse pounded in her ears. She stared at the doorway, certain something stood beyond it, just out of sight. The cry grew clearer. A woman's voice. Not speaking. Weeping. The monk's chanting intensified, faster now, sharper. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the cold. The temple walls creaked. From somewhere behind Nira came a soft dragging sound. She shut her eyes tightly. The weeping stopped. Silence slammed into the room. Then, from directly behind her ear, a whisper emerged, thin and brittle. "She is mine." Nira's eyes flew open. The candle flame erupted upward, then shrank to a trembling point. The monk struck the floor with his palm and shouted a final verse. The doors burst open. Wind rushed through the temple, scattering ash and extinguishing the candle. Darkness swallowed the room. For a long moment, nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Then the wind died. The air warmed. When the monk relit the lamp, the circle of ash was broken in 3 places. The bowl of water had turned cloudy, and on the saffron cloth lay a faint smear of dark red. Nira stared at it, her heart beat loud in the fragile quiet. The monk's voice was barely a whisper. "It has answered," he said. Outside, the forest stood motionless. But something had crossed the threshold.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The Bloodstained Past. Rain began before dawn. It fell in a slow, steady curtain that blurred the edges of the village and turned the dirt paths into dark ribbons of mud. The air smelled of wet soil and old smoke, and the clouds hung low enough to swallow the tops of the trees. Nira had not slept. Each time she closed her eyes, she heard the whisper again, brittle, possessive, certain. "She is mine." By morning, the monk sent her to speak with the oldest woman in the village, one who remembered what others refused to discuss. Her house stood near the abandoned rice fields, its bamboo walls patched with mismatched boards and strips of rusted tin. The woman opened the door before Nira could knock. Her eyes lingered on the scarf around Nira's throat. "You went to the temple," she said. It was not a question. Inside, the house smelled of medicinal herbs and damp straw. Bundles of dried roots hung from the rafters, clicking softly against one another as the wind slipped through the cracks in the walls. Nira explained about the grave, the ritual, the name carved into stone. At the sound of Molly, the old woman's hands began to tremble. For a long time, she said nothing. Rain tapped steadily against the roof. At first, the woman whispered, "We believed the spirits were angry. Decades ago, drought had hardened the fields and cracked the earth. Crops failed, children grew thin, livable water retreated deeper into the ground. Fear spread faster than hunger. When the wandering occult master arrived, the villagers listened. He told them the forest spirits demanded balance. A life for the harvest. A vessel for protection. They chose a girl from a poor family, one whose disappearance would not bring outsiders asking questions. Molly was 17. Quiet. Kind. She was taken into the forest at night beneath a moonless sky. They said she would become a guardian, the old woman murmured, voice shaking. They said her spirit would protect the village. Nira felt cold seep into her bones. "What really happened?" she asked. The woman's gaze drifted toward the rain-darkened doorway. "The binding did not make her a guardian," she whispered. "It made her a prisoner." The ritual tethered Molly's spirit to a charm soaked in blood and sealed with bone and hair. The occult master claimed it would keep hostile forces away. For a time, the rains returned. The fields recovered. But within months, sickness spread through the village. Animals refused to enter certain homes. Children woke screaming from dreams of a woman standing beside their beds. Those who kept the charm grew pale and thin. Some wandered into the forest at night and did not return. The occult master vanished before the next monsoon. The charm remained. "We tried to burn it," the woman said. "We tried to bury it. But it always returned." Her eyes lifted to meet Nira's. "It does not protect," she whispered. "It remembers." Thunder rolled in the distance. Nira's fingers tightened around her notebook. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" The old woman gave a hollow smile. "Because it chooses who must know." A sudden gust rattled the bamboo walls. The bundles of dried roots swayed and clicked together, producing a dry, brittle rhythm. Nira rose to leave. At the doorway, she paused. In the mud outside the house, rainwater pooled in shallow depressions. Among them were footprints. Bare. Narrow. Too small to belong to an adult. They led to the door. But none led away. Nira felt the old woman's gaze on her back. Behind her, the rain continued to fall. Somewhere beyond its steady rhythm, faint and fragile, came the sound of a girl weeping. And beneath it, something listening. Chapter 10. A body no longer her own. The rain stopped sometime in the night, leaving the village wrapped in a damp, breathless stillness. Mist clung low to the ground, blurring the edges of houses and turning the forest into a wall of pale gray shadow. Nira woke with mud beneath her fingernails. For several seconds she lay motionless, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. The dried earth packed under her nails was dark and damp, the smell of wet soil rising faintly from her skin. She did not remember leaving the house. Her feet ached. When she pushed herself upright, grains of dirt fell from the hem of her trousers onto the wooden floor. The door was bolted from the inside. A thin tremor moved through her chest. She checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages. The time read 5:12 a.m. Too early for footsteps in the road, too early for voices. Yet her body felt as though it had traveled far. She forced herself to breathe slowly and crossed to the basin. The water rippled as she washed her hands, streaks of mud dissolving into cloudy swirls. When she looked up at the mirror, she froze. Her reflection was smiling. A small, unfamiliar curve of the lips, not wide, not joyful, but intimate and knowing. Neera's breath caught. She pressed her fingers against her mouth. The smile remained. Then, as if released from tension, it vanished. Her own pale, frightened face stared back at her. She stumbled away from the mirror, heart hammering. Outside, the mist thickened, swallowing sound. The village seemed emptied of life, as though everyone had retreated indoors at the same unspoken hour. As the morning wore on, fragments of unease returned to her in flashes, the sensation of damp earth beneath her feet, the smell of moss and stagnant water, the impression of kneeling beside something cold and sunken. Each image dissolved before she could grasp it. By afternoon, exhaustion dragged at her limbs. She sat at the small table, trying to organize her notes, but the words blurred together. The air felt heavy again, pressing gently against her shoulders. A sound broke the silence. Soft, rhythmic, from beneath the floor. Tap, tap, tap. Neera's pulse quickened. She stared at the plank she had lifted the day before. The tapping stopped. The stillness that followed was worse. She rose slowly and crossed the room. The plank remained in place, unmoving. Dust settled undisturbed along its edges. As she stood there, her reflection appeared faintly in the darkened window beside her. For a brief moment, she thought she saw another figure standing behind her, a blur of pale gray shape and hanging hair. She turned. Nothing stood in the room. But when she looked down, her bare feet were coated in a thin layer of wet soil. Fresh. A pressure built slowly behind her eyes. Deep and throbbing, she gripped the edge of the table as dizziness washed over her. From somewhere distant, or perhaps from within her own chest, came a faint whisper, overlapping her thoughts like a second breath. Not words. Not yet. Only presence. The mist outside pressed against the walls. Inside, Neera stood trembling, uncertain where her own body ended and something else had begun. And beneath the quiet rhythm of her heartbeat, another cadence stirred, patient, waiting, learning the shape of her breath.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. Blood on her hands. The smell reached her before she opened her eyes. Metallic. Thick. Fresh. Neera woke slowly, her thoughts moving through a heavy fog. The room was dim, the oil lamp long extinguished, gray morning light seeping through the shutters in narrow strips. Her hands lay on the blanket before her. They were stained dark red. For a long moment, she did not move. The blood had dried in thin lines across her palms and along the creases of her fingers, flaking where her skin had shifted in sleep. It coated the edges of her nails and darkened the fabric beneath her wrists. Her pulse surged violently. She examined her arms, turning them over with trembling hands. No cuts. No wounds. No pain. Only blood. Her breath became shallow. She swung her feet to the floor and nearly slipped. The boards beneath her were slick in places, as though something wet had been dragged across them. A faint smear streaked the wood, leading from the doorway to the far wall. Neera followed it, each step slow and unwilling. The air felt colder near the wall, the temperature dropping with each inch she approached. Then she saw it. Words. Written across the wooden boards in dark, uneven strokes. Not painted. Not drawn. Smeared. Return what was taken. The letters were jagged, the edges blurred where fingers had dragged through wetness to shape them. Her stomach lurched. She staggered backward, shaking her head, whispering, "No, no, no." The room remained silent, but the metallic scent thickened. Her hands began to tremble violently. She stumbled to the basin and scrubbed at her skin, but the blood clung stubbornly in the lines of her palms, as if embedded beneath the surface. The water in the basin darkened, clouded, then turned faintly pink. She looked up. The mirror above the basin had fogged over. Condensation beaded across the glass, though the air remained cold. Slowly, as if guided by an unseen finger, a line formed in the mist. Then another. Letters emerged one stroke at a time. Mali. Neera's breath caught in her throat. The name completed itself. A thin crack snapped across the mirror's surface, splitting the reflection into fractured shards. For an instant, her own face fragmented into pale slivers. In one shard, her mouth hung open in terror. In another, her expression remained still, calm, watching. The lamp on the table flickered to life without flame. A faint sound rose behind her, not footsteps, not breath, but the slow drag of something wet across wood. Neera closed her eyes, unable to turn. The whisper came again, clearer now, threaded through her thoughts like a second pulse. Return what was taken. Her knees weakened. She gripped the basin to steady herself, heart pounding with a rhythm that no longer felt entirely her own. Outside, the mist pressed against the shutters. Inside, the smell of blood lingered. And somewhere within the fragile silence of the room, something waited, not with impatience, but with the certainty of a death long overdue. Chapter 12. The Terrible Truth. By afternoon, the mist had begun to lift, but the village remained muted, as though sound itself had been thinned by whatever presence lingered unseen. Neera kept the scarf tight around her throat and avoided the mirror. Even the act of breathing felt deliberate now, as if each inhale required permission. She returned to the temple with unsteady steps. The monk was waiting. He did not ask about the blood. His eyes moved instead to her hands, then to her face, as if measuring something beyond the visible. "It is no longer near you," he said softly. "It is within reach." Neera felt her pulse quicken. "What does it want from me?" The monk did not answer immediately. He rose and disappeared into a narrow storage room behind the altar. When he returned, he carried a small wooden box bound with faded cord. Dust clung to its corners. He set it before her. "This was kept by the abbot before me," he said, "records of the binding." Neera hesitated before lifting the lid. Inside lay brittle papers wrapped in cloth, their edges darkened by age and humidity. The writing, done in careful ink strokes, had faded to a dull brown. Names, dates, offerings. She turned the pages slowly, her fingers trembling. A family register. Marked beside the year of the ritual were the names of those who had consented, those who had delivered Molly into the forest in exchange for rain and protection. Her breath faltered. One name appeared again, written in firmer ink than the rest. A surname she knew. Her own. The page slipped from her fingers. "That cannot be," she whispered. The monk's voice remained gentle, but unyielding. Blood remembers what mouths refuse to speak. The air inside the temple felt suddenly thin. Neera's thoughts reeled backward through childhood stories, half-finished sentences from her grandmother, the way certain questions had always been deflected. "My family left this region generations ago," she said, though the words sounded fragile even to her own ears. "They left," the monk replied, "but blood travels." The charm had not chosen her randomly. It had followed a lineage. Not with haste. With patience. Through births, migrations, forgotten names, and silent histories, waiting until the blood of those who participated in the binding returned close enough to hear the forest breathe. Neera pressed her hands against the stone floor to steady herself. The surface felt cold, grounding. "Why now?" she whispered. The monk's gaze drifted toward the temple doorway, where gray light pooled like standing water. "Because the binding weakens," he said, "and what was taken was never returned." A faint ringing filled Neera's ears. The temple seemed to recede, its edges blurring. In its place came a sensation not quite memory, not quite imagination. Night air heavy with damp earth. Hands gripping her arms. A girl's muffled crying. The smell of blood mixed with incense smoke. Nira gasped and the vision shattered. The monk's hand hovered near her shoulder but did not touch her. "If the debt remains unpaid," he said quietly, "the spirit does not fade. It endures." Outside, the wind shifted through the prayer flags, twisting them sharply. Nira stared down at the brittle page bearing her family name. The ink seemed darker now, as if newly written. A cold certainty settled in her chest. She had not been brought here by curiosity. She had been summoned by inheritance. From somewhere beyond the temple walls came a faint sound, soft, fragile, unmistakable. A young woman weeping. Nira closed her eyes. And for the first time, the grief in that sound felt less like a threat, and more like a memory trying to return home.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The Spirit in the Mirror. Dusk arrived without color. The sky faded from gray to a depthless black, and the mist that had thinned during the day returned in slow, creeping layers. By the time Nira reached the house, the world beyond the stilts had dissolved into shifting pale vapor. Inside, the air felt colder than before. Not the chill of nightfall, but a dense, interior cold, as if the room had forgotten warmth entirely. She lit the oil lamp with shaking hands. The flame wavered, then steadied, casting fragile light across the wooden walls. Every shadow seemed deeper, thicker, as though the darkness were absorbing the glow rather than retreating from it. Nira avoided the floorboard where the bundle lay hidden. She avoided the window. She avoided the mirror. But the silence pressed inward from all sides, and the faint ringing in her ears, that thin, distant echo, would not cease. A soft sound broke the stillness. A faint crack. She turned. The mirror above the basin trembled in its frame. Another crack spread across the surface. A thin white fracture branching outward like lightning trapped in glass. Nira stepped backward, heart pounding. The air grew heavier. The lamp flame narrowed, bending toward the mirror. A third crack snapped across the glass. Then, from within the fractured surface, a dark shape moved. Nira's breath vanished from her lungs. A hand pressed slowly against the inside of the mirror. Pale, waterlogged. The fingers spread, leaving faint streaks as though pushing through a thin film of moisture. The glass did not shatter. Instead, it rippled, bending inward like the surface of disturbed water. The hand pushed further through. Then an arm. Long strands of black hair followed, sliding forward across the broken surface as though drawn by unseen gravity. Nira could not move, could not breathe. The figure emerged with slow, deliberate motion, shoulders passing through the glass without resistance. The room filled with the smell of damp earth and old iron. When the face lifted, strands of hair parted. The skin was gray-white, stretched thin over hollow cheeks. Lips cracked and darkened, eyes sunken and ringed with shadows that seemed to deepen without end. Yet within those eyes burned a terrible awareness. Recognition. The spirit tilted its head, studying her. Water dripped soundlessly from its hair onto the wooden floor, leaving dark stains that did not spread. Nira's knees trembled violently. Her voice fractured. I didn't know. The spirit's mouth opened slowly. The jaw stretched too wide. When it spoke, the voice did not emerge from its lips alone. It echoed through the room, through the floor, through the hollow spaces within Nira's chest. You carry their blood. The air tightened around her throat. Not choking, not yet, but reminding. Nira's eyes filled with tears. I wasn't there. I didn't. The spirit took one slow step forward. The lamp flame bent sharply toward it, shrinking. Blood remembers. Another step. Cold seeped through the floorboards into Nira's bare feet, rising through bone and marrow. Pain remembers. The spirit stopped only an arm's length away. Up close, the scent of damp soil and rusted iron thickened, filling her lungs with each shallow breath. For a moment, the spirit did not move. Then its hand lifted. Not to strike, not to seize, but to touch. Its fingers hovered just above Nira's cheek. The cold radiating from them burned like ice against exposed skin. Nira squeezed her eyes shut. A flood of sensation burst behind her eyelids. Night forest air thick with incense. Hands forcing a struggling girl to her knees. A blade flashing in dim light. A cry swallowed by chanting. Nira gasped and stumbled backward as the visions shattered. The spirit remained where it stood. Watching. Waiting. Behind it, the mirror hung fractured and dark. And within the fragile silence, Nira understood. This was not an attack. This was remembrance. Outside, the mist pressed against the walls. Inside, the distance between the living and the dead had narrowed to a single breath. Chapter 14. The Final Ritual. The monk arrived before midnight. Mist clung low to the ground, swirling around the temple steps like breath rising from the earth. No wind stirred the trees. Yet the prayer flags twisted sharply, their faded cloth snapping in uneven bursts. Nira followed him inside without speaking. The fractured mirror, the apparition, the memories that were not hers, all had stripped language of meaning. Only the weight of inevitability remained. Inside the temple, the air was colder than the night outside. The monk had prepared the ritual space, a wide circle drawn in ash and powdered bone. Its edges marked with small oil lamps that burned with thin, trembling flames. At the circle's center lay the red cloth bundle, newly unwrapped, its contents arranged with deliberate care. Hair, bone, the metal charm, and the dark stain that had once been blood. Nira's chest tightened. This binding was made through blood, the monk said quietly. It can only be answered through blood. The temple doors closed behind them with a hollow thud. The monk began to chant. His voice moved slowly at first, each syllable grounded and deliberate. The air vibrated faintly, as though the sound pressed against unseen surfaces. Nira stepped into the circle. Cold rose through the soles of her feet. The oil lamps flickered violently, their flames bending inward toward the center. Outside, a low wind began to circle the temple. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The monk handed her a small ceremonial blade. Its metal surface reflected the lamplight in thin, wavering lines. "You must give willingly," he said. The spirit was bound without choice. The debt can only be answered through offering freely given. Her hands trembled. For a moment, fear surged through her chest, instinctive, human, desperate to survive. Then came the memory. A girl forced to kneel. Hands gripping her shoulders. A cry swallowed by chanting. Nira closed her eyes. "I choose," she whispered. She pressed the blade to her palm. The cut burned sharply. Blood welled, dark and immediate, sliding along the lines of her skin before falling onto the cloth below. The moment the first drop struck, the lamps flared. Wind roared against the temple walls. The chant deepened, rising in urgency. The air thickened, vibrating with pressure. From beyond the circle came the sound of weeping. Not distant. Not faint. Close. Nira opened her eyes. Molly stood just beyond the ash boundary. Her form wavered between substance and shadow, hair hanging in damp strands around her face. Her hollow eyes fixed on the blood soaking into the cloth. The weeping ceased. Silence fell like a weight. Nira extended her bleeding hand forward. "I return what was taken," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "Not for fear, not for protection, but for you." The spirit did not move. The monk's chanting slowed. The lamps flickered wildly, then steadied. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the blood on the cloth began to spread outward, soaking through the fibers in branching lines like roots seeking water. The metal charm vibrated softly. A low sound rose from the floor beneath them, not a voice. Not whined, but a deep resonance, as if something buried far below had shifted. Molly stepped forward. The ash circle did not break. She knelt slowly before the cloth bundle. Her fingers hovered above the blood-darkened fabric. The temple trembled. Wind screamed through the rafters. The lamps extinguished all at once. Darkness swallowed the room. In the blackness, Nira felt a sudden pressure close around her throat, not crushing, but holding, testing. The monk's voice rang out one final verse. A burst of cold surged through the temple. Then, silence. The pressure vanished. The air warmed. When the lamps rekindled, their flames steady and calm, the red cloth lay still at the center of the circle. The blood had darkened to a deep, matte black. The metal charm had split cleanly in two. Molly was gone. Neera collapsed to her knees, breath shuddering. For the first time since arriving, the temple air felt empty. Not silent. Not waiting. Empty. The monk exhaled slowly. "It is finished," he said. But as the last lamp flickered, a faint wind passed through the doorway, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and rain. And something within that fading breath felt less like departure, and more like release.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. What Remains. Morning arrived quietly. For the first time since Neera had entered the village, sound returned in small, tentative layers, the distant call of birds, the creak of wood as doors opened, the low murmur of voices resuming their place in the rhythm of daily life. The mist had lifted. Sunlight filtered through the trees, touching the ground in pale gold patches that seemed almost unfamiliar. Neera stood outside the temple steps, her bandaged palm resting against the railing. The air no longer pressed against her lungs. The cold that had lived beneath her skin had receded, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. Villagers moved carefully along the dirt road, their eyes lingering on her not with fear, but with a quiet, uncertain gratitude. Some paused to press their palms together in greeting. Others simply bowed their heads as they passed. No one spoke of the night. Inside the temple, the ash circle had been swept away. The broken charm pieces lay wrapped in saffron cloth, to be carried deep into the forest and buried where the binding had first been made. The monk emerged beside her. "The spirit is no longer tethered," he said, "but memory does not vanish. It settles." Neera watched sunlight settle across the temple courtyard stones. Will she find peace? The monk considered this. "Peace is not given," he replied. "It is allowed." By afternoon, Neera packed her bag. The house at the edge of the village stood unchanged, yet the oppressive stillness had lifted. The air inside no longer carried the scent of iron. The shadows remained only shadows. She paused beside the loose floorboard. For a moment, she considered lifting it. Instead, she pressed it firmly back into place. Some things did not need to be unearthed again. When the transport truck arrived to take her toward the main road, the driver avoided the village center, choosing instead a narrow track that skirted the forest's edge. The trees stood dense and watchful, but no longer suffocating. As the village disappeared behind them, Neera felt an unexpected heaviness settle in her chest, not fear, not grief, but the lingering weight of something witnessed and carried forward. Clouds gathered on the horizon. Rain would come again. Weeks later, in Bangkok, the city noise wrapped around her like a protective barrier. Engines, voices, neon light, movement without memory. Life resumed its relentless pace. Yet sometimes, in reflective surfaces, train windows, dark phone screens, rain-slicked pavement, she caught glimpses of her own face and felt a flicker of unfamiliar stillness beneath it. Not possession. Not presence. Remembrance. One evening, as she crossed a narrow alley after rain, something caught her eye near the curb. A strip of faded red cloth, half buried in the gutter. She told herself it was nothing. Only fabric washed loose from somewhere upstream. Still, she stopped. Water trickled slowly along the pavement, darkened by street grime. The cloth clung to the concrete, heavy with rain. She did not touch it. As she stepped away, a cold breeze moved through the alley, carrying the scent of wet soil. Behind her, the cloth shifted slightly in the shallow current. From somewhere beyond the sound of traffic, beyond the pulse of the city, came a faint sound, so soft it might have been imagination. Not weeping, not calling, only a breath drawn after a long silence. Neera did not turn around. She continued walking, her footsteps merging with the rhythm of the city. Behind her, rain began to fall again. And in the thin space between memory and forgetting, something waited, not in hunger, not in rage, but in the quiet endurance of what had once been bound, and finally remembered. Some debts never disappear. They travel through blood, memory, and time, waiting to be remembered. And sometimes, what we think has ended is only waiting for the next soul to find it.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.